Hola, ¿qué tal? Bienvenidos a un nuevo directo Idiomas en Positivo, donde ya sabes que buscamos el efecto multiplicador de los idiomas. Hoy la colaboración que tenemos es algo que está súper bien, me emociona muchísimo porque vamos a hablar de los nativos. He hecho ya algunos vídeos, por cierto, te animo a que te suscribas a este canal de YouTube para seguir todos los vídeos semanales. Pues en algunos vídeos hemos hablado del desafío que supone hablar con nativos. Cuando nosotros, hispanoparlantes, hablamos en inglés con un nativo, normalmente aparece mucha ansiedad, mucho miedo, porque no me va a entender, no me voy a saber explicar. Y a veces creemos que todo el peso de la comunicación cae en nosotros, porque somos nosotros los que nos estamos acercando a la otra persona, al nativo. La compañera que tenemos aquí, Shelley, a quien conocí a través de LinkedIn, pronunciado a la española, es una profesional del mundo de los idiomas que tiene una propuesta espectacular. Enseguida le voy a dar paso para que nos explique quién es, qué hace y por qué ha desarrollado la propuesta que ella tiene, que no voy a decir nada porque voy a dejar que ella misma nos la explique. Por cierto, vamos a empezar en español porque ella habla también español y después pasaremos a inglés. Shelley, muy bienvenida, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Cuéntanos quién eres, qué haces y por qué tienes esa súper propuesta.
Pues yo me llamo Shelley Purchon. Pronunciado a lo español sería Purchon, me imagino. Aunque cuando yo vivía en España no tenía ese apellido y tenía otro. Pues mi empresa se llama English Unlocked. Y yo ayudo a otros ingleses o a americanos a cambiar su manera de hablar para que los que están aprendiendo el inglés les entiende mejor.
Suena fantástico. Shelley, ¿cómo llegaste a esto? Porque creo que al principio tú eras profesora de inglés.
Sí, durante años. Yo me fui a vivir en Madrid con los 23 años y no hablaba nada de español. Tenía ahí unos amigos que estaban trabajando como profesores de inglés. No era difícil encontrar trabajo y me encantó España y me quedé ahí 7 años. Pues eso fue en los años 90 y yo trabajaba como profesora, aprendí el español y después volví a Inglaterra. Y no tenía la intención de seguir dando clases de inglés, pero en eso caí. Y yo notaba que mis alumnos, yo trabajaba en un instituto, no sé cómo se decía, pues college, los adultos, ¿no? Y me daba cuenta que siempre que les llevaba a mis alumnos a la biblioteca, por ejemplo, o a la cafetería, pues los ingleses que trabajaban ahí hablaban con mis alumnos de una manera que mis pobres alumnos no se enteraban de nada. Y yo pensaba, pues, ¿por qué hablan así? No les van a entender. Y así, poco a poco, me llegó la idea de ponerme a explicar a ellos cómo pueden cambiar su manera de comunicar para que los extranjeros les entiendan mejor.
Qué bueno, porque comentábamos justo antes de empezar esta colaboración y grabar esta entrevista que al parecer uno puede pensar que por ser angloparlante tiene ventajas respecto a los que no somos, que tenemos que acercarnos, pero no siempre es así porque, como tú bien decías, y es una realidad, muy a menudo el no nativo, cuando tiene que hablar con un nativo en inglés, evita la situación porque tiene ese miedo de que es que no lo entiendo, o no me va a entender él, o no voy a hablar suficientemente bien, o no le voy a entender porque habla como si yo fuera nativo y no soy. Entonces eso realmente también les perjudica mucho. Y este punto es importante porque muchas veces nosotros tenemos complejos porque no hablamos bien inglés y no somos conscientes de que los nativos ingleses también tienen sus miedos o sus desafíos, sus challenges, cuando tienen que hablar con no nativos. Shall we switch to English now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that's great. So if you could explain who you help and the benefits they get with your program, and then the main challenges that they have when they speak with non-native English speakers.
Right. Well, the most difficult thing about establishing this company has been getting people to understand what I do and to understand that it's important and that they need it and that this is a skill which they can learn. And the first clients who have taken this seriously and invested in paying me to help their employees have been here in the northeast of England. And they are people who help immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers. So my very first client was a school. The teachers needed some help so that they could speak to children from other countries.
Yeah.
I've also had clients from the National Health Service, so doctors, nurses, people who work for charities, lawyers, abogados, and other people that work in public services. And usually the conversations that they are having are with people who have quite low English skills. Sometimes they need an interpreter, but sometimes it's not appropriate to bring in an interpreter, but they do need to have a conversation with that person. So those have been my first clients, and more recently, multinational corporations are starting only now to wake up to the possibility that they can help their staff to communicate better, not just with clients, but also with their international colleagues.
Exactly. And how do you help them? So if you have someone who doesn't speak English or has a very low level, how would you help this lawyer or doctor to communicate with this person in such a critical situation also, because this is very sensitive?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if it's a very sensitive situation, they absolutely need an interpreter.
Okay.
So I always tell people, look, these tips work, but don't become too confident because you still need an interpreter. You can't miss out that step.
Okay.
But to answer your question of how I demonstrate this, I use Spanish. I don't know if this expression exists in Spanish, Paloma, but I give them a taste of their own medicine by speaking another language. Does that expression exist?
Sí, sí, sí.
Yeah? ¿Cómo se dice?
Es igual, dar con su propia medicina.
Dar con su propia medicina.
Sí.
Okay, so that's what I do. So I ask them to watch me speak Spanish, and I speak natural speed Spanish, which sounds fast. Really difficult for them because, you know, most British people don't speak Spanish, or maybe they speak a little bit. So I ask them, did you understand that? How much? What percentage did you understand? And people tell me, oh, 0, oh, 10%. And we talk about, yeah, well, that's how you sound if you speak English at natural speed and you don't modify the way that you speak. And then after that, I speak to them about the same topic in Spanish again, but this time very differently. And I use my face more, I use gestures, I slow down my speech. There's a a video. I think you've seen it.
Yeah,
Paloma.
I will share it. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So after that, I ask them, how much could you understand? Could you understand what I wanted you to do? And they can. And I say, hey, surprise, you can speak Spanish. You can, or you can understand Spanish if I speak it more carefully. So then we look at how we can take those same strategies and they can use those strategies when they're speaking English.
That's great. So that would be for a basic level. What about an advanced one or a medium intermediate? Because then it's different when you speak to adults, that you have to pay attention, as we said before, that you don't treat that person as a kid. So how would you approach when the level is higher? Well,
then I focus on which parts of English are more difficult. So when I was an English teacher, I would have to teach my students phrasal verbs. Yeah, I know you all hate phrasal verbs, right?
Yeah.
Well, and they're everywhere. We use them all the time.
Yeah.
Now, most native English speakers have got no idea that phrasal verbs even exist. They've got no knowledge about phrasal verbs or idioms. So I explain what they are. I give examples, and I explain that other languages don't have phrasal verbs. Most other languages, I know that in Spanish, phrasal verbs don't exist.
No.
So I explain, you know, in English, we kind of cheat. Like we have a verb, look, and then, so look means mirar, obviously, and then to create the word buscar, we just add a preposition. Hey, we changed the meaning. And I ask people to think about, like, how confusing is that for listeners who, yeah, maybe they have got excellent English, but there are over 10,000 phrasal verbs. Do you think they've memorized all of them? And do you think they're listening always for that preposition which changes the meaning of the original verb? Because they're not. Like, that's hard. So that's just one example of the language awareness that I encourage people to bring in.
And then idioms also are very difficult. Very nice, but very difficult.
Yeah. And every language has idioms.
Sure.
Yeah. So do you know the idiom, there's no point? Like in I'm sure you know it, Paloma. Yeah. So there's no point doing something. So when I was learning Spanish, I had no insight into how languages work, which is the case for most British people. Yeah. So I thought you could just translate things word for word and that it would make sense. So I started to say to people, no hay punto.
No hay punto.
Yeah. And people didn't correct me. They were too polite to say that doesn't mean anything. But they just looked at me like, okay. And then I realized that you have to say no tiene sentido. Yeah, so it's a completely different phrase.
Yeah.
And so I use that example sometimes to get people thinking about how difficult idioms are.
That's good. So what would be the main challenges for English native?
Well, the ones that I'm training, I find that one big challenge is how to speak without being patronizing.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, going back to what you said before, Paloma, I point out that, of course, if you speak at a different level, like a different speed than your conversation partner, then that can be patronizing. Like if your conversation partner speaks quite good English and then you speak really, really slowly for them, well, that you've misjudged that, and that is patronizing. So I ask them to listen carefully to the speed that their conversation partner has and try to match it. But something that they do, I don't know if any of your viewers have experienced this when visiting the UK, but people talk like this. Do you come from Spain? I've been to Spain. I've been to Mallorca. So I have to really give that as an example of how not to speak.
So funny. Like this. So.
Yeah, which is deeply patronizing. But I feel like people do that not out of malice.
No, just to help.
They're trying to help, but they don't know how. They know, I have to slow down, but I don't know how. So I give them alternative ways of slowing down.
I would say that here it's not that we speak slower, but we speak we
louder,
shout. And we all use a lot our hands. Go there, la la la, la la la. We say la 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 like this. We fill the gaps when we don't know.
Yeah, but sometimes just gesturing wildly isn't helpful.
No,
so
it's more confusing sometimes.
Yeah, one tip that I give people is, yes, do use gesture, but try to say the word and show the gesture together at the same time, and then stop the gesture. Like keep them short and tie them to the words that you're using.
That's very interesting.
But that is another challenge to now that we're speaking about it, is that British people seem very unexpressive. I don't know if this is something that you've noticed, but that we're very naturally quite deadpan. I don't know, your viewers might not know that word, deadpan, but it's like, the face does not show.
Inexpressivo.
So deadpan is a way of saying that same thing. And it's the culture, it's the British culture, I think, to make a joke, but we don't laugh when we make the joke. Things like that.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's difficult.
You don't identify it's a joke or not.
Yeah, exactly. I can't tell if she's joking or not. Exactly. I suffered a lot with that when I moved to Spain. Probably the Spanish people I was speaking to suffered even more than me, because I would say things and I knew I was joking, but my listener would think I was serious. That happened again and again. So yeah, that's another challenge that people face, is that naturally we're not very expressive, so maybe we feel a bit silly doing the faces and the gestures that can help our listener,
because it's not natural.
Yeah, it's not the British way. We're very reserved. Yeah.
So polite and And do you have any other challenge?
Yeah, so if we're thinking about people that work in a multinational, their colleagues or their clients probably do speak really good English. And a challenge that those people have is that they just don't notice how much their listening partner, their conversation partner, is struggling. Just, they think, oh, well, when that German person speaks, they speak fluently. I understand 100% of what they're saying, so I'm sure that they understand 100% of what I'm saying. And they don't realize that English is the language with the biggest vocabulary of all languages. And as a speaker, it's quite possible that you're using vocabulary that your fluent English colleague doesn't know. But because they're working in an English speaking environment, and they feel proud of having learned English, and they don't want to admit maybe that they didn't understand something, then that can go unnoticed. I don't know if this is an experience that you've had, Paloma, when you're in like an international business environment, that you pretend that you understand, because
and
without
smile,
good English, you wouldn't have that job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You smile, but you don't understand, and you don't dare to ask that person to repeat, because you are sometimes afraid that that person is going to repeat with the same words and I'm not going to understand. So yeah, I mean, there are ways to ask to repeat so that you can do it in a different way. But yes, sometimes you don't understand and you don't dare to say that you haven't understood. That's true.
Yeah.
So I think what you mean is that your client has to pay attention, and I don't know if in English you say calibrar.
Yeah.
The expressions and make sure that the other person is really understanding.
Absolutely. And the awareness around this is especially low in monolingual people. Most British and most American people are monolingual native English speakers. So like the example I gave where I didn't understand, that you can't just say no hay punto and it works. Like that awareness around phrasal verbs, idioms, that awareness of which are the difficult parts of what I'm saying, that awareness is very low. So that's a way that I can help, is I can help you notice which parts of your language are confusing for non-native speakers, and help you to reduce your use of those words.
So they feel more confident when they speak to non-English native speakers.
Yeah, that's a big result that I get. When I run my training events, I always ask for feedback. I give them a form to complete, and I ask them, how confident were you before this? And how confident are you now speaking with somebody whose first language isn't English? And the numbers really go up. Yeah, and it's a stressful thing. I know that it's stressful, of course, for the Spanish person or the international person, but it can be stressful for the doctor or the lawyer or the school teacher who's trying to make themselves understood to somebody with beginner English. They feel embarrassed. They feel like, oh, how can I explain this? It is stressful. Yeah. So they need help building their confidence too.
Sounds so good. And Shelley, would you give us a tip to the non-English natives? So to me, a tip when I speak to a native English, how can I help also that person to have a better communication?
Oh, that's a good question. So how can you maybe introduce at the beginning of the conversation the possibility that, look, I've got fluent English, but still sometimes I might not understand you. Yeah. Well, I guess you could begin by saying, sometimes when I'm speaking to native English speakers, I don't understand something, but I feel embarrassed to actually admit that. Do you mind? I feel comfortable with you. Is it okay if I just tell you that I don't understand something? You could do that.
Yeah. So you show vulnerability.
Yeah.
But you don't apologize because of your English is not perfect.
Oh yeah, there's no need to apologize. And you know, because we're mostly monolingual in Britain, if you can speak another language, it's like you're a magician. And we do, most of us have a sense of inferiority, that I can't speak any French, and look at that French person, they speak such good English. And we do recognize and admire the language abilities of other countries, I think. I remember great. Yeah, I remember when I went to live in Spain and I couldn't speak Spanish, and I came back a year later and I could speak it, and my friend said, you can speak Spanish, go on then, say something. And I said, pues yo no sé qué quieres que diga. And she went, oh. So, it's like I had a magic ability suddenly that, so that, the fact that you can speak English well is not something to apologize for. Another option is maybe you could say, I know I sound fluent to you. I am fluent in English, but sometimes listening is harder than speaking. I always have the words I need when I'm speaking. Well, or I usually have the words that I need when I'm speaking, but when I'm listening, often people use words that I've not heard before, and it's harder. I just wondered if you could keep that in mind when we're speaking.
Yeah.
Another option.
Yeah. That's very helpful, and I love when you said that you admire people who speak other languages, because usually we feel less because we don't speak proper English, which is, and it's something that we really focus also, that to have the right mindset and the right beliefs about ourselves, because sometimes we have like my case, we have such a strong Spanish accent when we speak English, but that's okay, because I am sure that you can understand me, even if I have this accent, and this is my accent. So we sometimes feel that we are not equal because we don't speak fluent English or a perfect British accent or an American accent. So I really thank you about explaining us that it's not like this, that it's not that just because I am British or I speak English and I just speak English, I feel better.
No, the opposite. It's the opposite. And a Spanish accent is sexy. Well, it is. I'll tell you now, a Spanish accent is a sexy accent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing to feel ashamed of.
No, not at all. If you travel to Britain, you will be viewed as exotic, cosmopolitan, not inferior. I don't think so. Of course, we get racist people everywhere, but I think most people that I know have that view.
Okay, thank you so much. Would you like to add anything else before we finish?
Well, if anybody would like to get in touch with me, I'm present on LinkedIn. I'm not very active on Facebook or Twitter. So I would love to hear from you on LinkedIn, or if you go to my website and send me a message from there. I'd love to hear your experiences of what's the most difficult thing when you're in an international business setting. What difficulties have you had? And maybe I can use those paragraphs or phrases to show to the people that I'm training and show them, look, this is how people feel, especially if you've got quite good English, but you still feel that you're working at a disadvantage, and that sometimes you hide the problems that you have understanding English. I would love to hear from you, and just give me your name. If you prefer to be anonymous, that's fine too, but just to read some kind of first-hand experiences and share them with my audience would be really nice.
Sure, we'll work on that. ¿Te parece pasamos a español para despedirnos? Y aprovechar que eres una británica que habla más de un idioma. Muchísimas gracias, Shelley. He disfrutado un montón y estoy segura de que las personas que vean este vídeo también van a disfrutar y les va a ayudar a sentirse más seguros y con más confianza, y también entender mejor al nativo que tienen delante. Muchísimas gracias, Shelley.
De nada, ha sido todo un placer.
Perfecto. Y como siempre, gracias a ti por ver este vídeo. Espero que te ayude también a empatizar y entender mejor al nativo cuando lo tengas delante, y por supuesto a sentirte más seguro cuando hablas inglés o cualquier otro idioma. Nos vemos en el siguiente vídeo. Hasta pronto. Chao.